What is up, guys? My name is Matt from Magic the Greatening, and I got you a really cool budget mono green desert Stompy deck to show you today. This deck is kind of sweet, slow. It's budget. Don't expect it to be too competitive, but it is still sweet nonetheless. A green-red desert deck has been showing up of late, and I've had this deck built for months now. I just forgot to put it in the polls. Not months, but weeks. But the green-red desert deck has been getting a lot of play. Plays things like Ulamog, stuff that's way out of budget, constraints. So I'm like, oh, this is a good time to release this deck that I forgot to release like weeks ago. So before we get started, go ahead, hit that like button. Helps out a lot. Subscribe if you are new. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers. Help me reach that mark. And there will be no voting for this video. Usually vote in the top right corner, but no voting this week. Or this video, excuse me. Next video on Sunday, or 2 days from when I release this, will be Abzan Solemnity, which basically just uses Solemnity, and then we just abuse the trigger that our guys don't get counters. So we just play a whole bunch of creatures that are supposed to put counters on themselves, but now they don't. So let's get into this video. Alright, so usually I start with the creatures, then the non-creature spells, and the lands. But we're going to actually go over the ramp spells and the land first, just because it's important for the deck. So we're going to be playing 4 copies of Beneath the Sands and 4 copies of Hour of Promise. Beneath the Sands can just put a land onto the battlefield tapped and kind of ramp us into our Hour of Promise. Before I get into Hour of Promise, this also can cycle out late in the game when we don't need it. That is just like an added bonus to that card. Hour of Promise has been getting a lot of love recently, and finally, it took people weeks to notice how good this card was. We're not going to be using this card for how the green-red desert deck uses it, in which they just hit Shrine of the Forsaken God with this, and then they can cast Ulamog next turn. We don't do that, and the reason is because we don't have any colorless creatures. Shrine of the Forsaken God only activates if you're using it to cast colorless creatures. So we will just be abusing the mechanic that says if you control 3 or more deserts, create 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So for 5 mana, we get 4 power. We get basically 5 mana, 4/4, get 2 lands onto the battlefield tapped. So the land we're playing is 4 Desert at the Abominable, 4 Heshep Oasis, and 16 forests. That's a total of 24 lands. Desert and Heshep are the only green deserts in Standard. We can play colorless land or deserts, but didn't feel the need to. The 8 is enough. We can usually get a desert by the time we play an Hour of Promise. So yeah, let's move on because that's all I gotta say about those 2 cards. Let's get into the creatures now. Let's go back to our old format. We're gonna be playing 3 copies of Ovia and 4 copies of Ramunap Hydra. Yeah, we're not playing any 2 or 3 drop creatures. I was playing Resilient Kenra or whatever his name is. He's basically a 2 mana 2/1 that enters when he enters. He says target creature you control gets +X until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. But he just didn't turn out good enough and didn't fit very well in the deck. So Ovia, I've always liked this card. I don't know why other people don't play this. For 1 mana, it's a 1/2. It can create us 1/1s, which is okay if we need a chump or something, but also can create us an XX, where X is the number of creatures you control, and that's where Ovia really starts going in. I know this is very susceptible to removal, but once they realize we're a mono-green Stompy deck, they're going to take out their Fatal Pushes, they're going to take out their Magma Sprays, they're going to bring in their hard removal and counters. So this will kind of just slip right in there and just start doing work for us. And they'll have to waste a removal spell on a 1-drop, which feels really good for this deck. And then Ramunap Hydra, ever since this card was spoiled, I just immediately made a deck around it, and eventually that deck evolved into this deck. For 4 mana, he's a 3/3 with Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. That's pretty good. But he says he gets +1/+1 as long as you control a desert. Hey, we're trying to hit deserts with our Hour of Promise, so that's really good. So he's now a 4 mana 4/4 Vigilance, Reach, Trample. Oh, but he also says if you have a desert in your graveyard, he gets another +1/+1. Not a counter, by the way. He just turns into a 5/5 or a 4/4 or whatever. And now he's a 4-mana 5/5 Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. Do you know what that means? He can successfully block Heart of Kiran. He can successfully block anything that Godpharaoh's Gift reanimates. He can successfully block a Gisela. So just becomes super, super relevant in the meta right now, which is kind of Sunmare decks, Godpharaoh Gifts decks. Mardu Vehicles is still rolling around there. So Ramunap Hydra is just super strong right now in the standard. Yeah, let's get on to our other creatures here. We're playing 3 copies of Arborback Stomper, 3 copies of Scaled Behemoth, and 4 copies of Soul of the Harvest. I'll get into Soul of the Harvest last, but Arborback Stomper is a 5-mana 5/4 trample that when he enters, you get 5 life, which can be important if you're playing against an aggro deck or stuff like that. Put out a huge body they can't really deal with, and then gain 5 life. So, yeah. Scaled Behemoth is a 6-mana 6/7 hexproof. We have ways of getting this Vigilance and Trample. Only 2 cards in the deck do that. We'll get into that later. But just a 6-mana 6/7 hexproof is really good. Most decks nowadays run like 4 to 8 things of removal, so they can remove all our other stuff, but they can't target this at all. So that is super sweet. And then the 4 copies of Soul of the Harvest. Now, I want to say immediately, this is in Standard. It's part of the Welcome 2016 pack, but it is part of Standard. Looked it up, it's Standard legal. So you can play this. It rotates out with Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, so that'll be a while. And it is super strong. It's 6 mana for a 6/6 trample, which is a decent body. Trample is huge on this thing. But it says whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. And that is huge in this deck. I know we're only playing 17 creatures. We're creating a lot of huge tokens in this deck, but this is still just super strong. We need to draw cards in this deck, and if this stays out for a turn, we can draw 1 or 2 cards and just really get out of hand. So Soul of the Harvest is just super, super sweet in this deck. It is Standard legal. Let's move to the non-creature spells. So let's start with the non-creature spells here with 3 copies of Grapple of the Past and 4 copies of Ronus's Last Stand. Grapple of the Past is the only 3 cards in the deck that will rotate at a Standard when Ixalan comes out. Not even the sideboard. Nothing in the sideboard rotates out. Only this, which is a bummer because this is a super important card in the deck, especially if the things like Ramunap Hydra, and they can get stuff back from our graveyard that had been killed off. They kill off an Arborback Stomper or Ramunap Hydra or Soul of the Harvest or something. Just get it back to our hand. Also can help us hit a land drop if we don't have a 3rd land for like Beneath the Sands on turn 3. So Grapple with the Past is kind of a key important part of the deck. I know we're only playing 3 of it, but it's kind of important. If you're bummed that this rotates out, I don't know what to tell you because we really need this card in this deck. I try to find a replacement for it, but nothing really does what Grapple with the Past does. And then the Ronus's Last Stand is another super strong turn 2 play. In fact, it's probably the ideal turn 2 play, I would say, because it's a 2-mana 5/4, and if you're on the play, ooh, this thing is ridiculously strong. Now, the problem with this, it can get unsummoned, which destroys the token. It can get Fatal Pushed, which destroys the token. It can get Grasp of Darkness. All these can be played on, they can respond to this with those. So, also can get countered by Negate, which is kind of bad. Your opponent might not play Negate in the sideboard. We're playing 19 non-creature spells and 17 creature spells. And your opponent is thinking, oh, they're playing Mono Green Stompy. But we're playing more non-creature spells than creature spells. So they might take out some Negates for Essence Scatters, in which case we don't have to worry about this getting countered. Alright, the last 2 non-creature spells we're playing in the deck is 2 copies of Nature's Way and 2 copies of Sandwurm Convergence. So Nature's Way is removal. And it says it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. That's fine. So it's not where your creature fights another creature, it just deals its power to a target creature. So you can shoot down something with Death Touch or something. You've got to worry about with on your opponent's side. And then it can also give that same creature vigilance and trample, which is good with one of our huge 5/5 sandwurm convergence tokens, our Ronus's token, our scaled Behemoth. You can even give it to the Solar Harvest. You want to leave it back up to block, or the Arborback Stomper, you want to leave it back to block. Just super, super powerful in that sense. Obviously, probably don't want to use the trample and vigilance abilities on a Ramunap Hydra because it already has vigilance and trample. But had to play the 2 copies of this. At least it's some removal. So, and then Sandwurm Convergence says creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. A lot of people just pass this card up. Oh, it's an 8-mana enchantment. It's not going to do anything. I love this card because it says creatures with flying can't attack you. They're locked out. They're done. Heart of Kiron, gone. You know, your Ramunap Hydra can hold down the aerial attack, but this locks it down. It literally locks it down. They can't attack you with Gacellas. Anything with flying from Godfarrow's Gift. It just, oh, it's so strong. And then at end step, it gives you 5/5s. It's a token generator of 5/5s. Like, they fumigate your board. Cool, we just got another 5/5. Obviously, it happens on your end step, which is a little lame, but still can refill your board of really huge creatures. And just to let you guys know, again, Solar Harvest, that 6/6 trample guy that draws his cards, he doesn't get a trigger from non-token creatures or from token creatures. So you have to actually like play a real creature in order to get that card. So like you're not going to draw a card every time Sandwurm Convergence tokens come out, or the Ronus's Last Stand or whatever. So keep that in mind, but still a super strong card in this deck. We've already gone over the lands, but I'll quickly just run past them again. 4 Desert the Indomitable, 4 Hashep Oasis, 16 Forest. Alright, cool. That was just in case you weren't paying attention. Let's move to the sideboard. Sideboard time, and green has a trouble in this standard. White has probably the best sideboard plan against the meta in this standard, but we will do our best. We will play 3 copies of Appetite for the Unnatural to destroy things like Godfarrow's Gift, Liliana's Mastery, just super powerful things that are enchantments and artifacts that we don't like keeping out on the board. 2 Blossoming Defense against Control, pretty standard. 2 Crook of Condemnation against Graveyard Strategies. I know this kind of hurts our Ramunap Hydra or whatever, but I said this about my blue-black Scarab God Control. If this card, we sideboarded in, and it hurts our opponents more than us, I'm okay with that, even if it hurts us a little bit. Whatever. Sometimes you got to hurt your opponent more. Both got to hurt yourselves, but you got to hurt them there. If that makes any sense. I'm just rambling at this point. 3 Haze of Pollen for aggro. It's just like Beneath the Sands. You just cycle it out when you no longer need it. You can stop the huge combat that's coming through. Maybe they're playing a whole bunch of prowess guys, or they're playing a pummeler deck. They think, oh, I have a 64/64 trample pummeler. Well, I'm just going to prevent all combat damage, and you're going to waste all your energy. Yeah, pretty strong against that deck. 2 Heroic Intervention to save us from Fumigates. This doesn't stop Hour of Devastation, but our creatures are pretty much immune to Hour of Devastation. Scaled Behemoth can't get killed by it. Soul to Harvest can't get killed by it. Everything else can, so maybe we are a little bit vulnerable to it. But 2 of our bigger creatures don't die to this, but if they're not playing red, and you think they got Fumigates in their sideboards, Heroic Intervention, knock that in. And then 3 Prowling Serpopards, so our stuff doesn't get countered. It can't save or it can't protect our Sandwurm Convergence or Ronus's Last Stand or anything like that, but can help us resolve Soul the Harvest and Scaled Behemoth, which is super, super nice. So yeah, that is our sideboard. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed a super, super budget deck tech, I know, but it can be really, really powerful at times. If your opponent's not running any removal, this just tramples over them quite literally. A lot of our guys have trample. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.